Get with me. I deal with reality. Loosen your mind to the truth and don't get mad at me. No politician can give you peace. If you trust Jesus, why do you vote for a beast? Emancipation is long overdue, so it becomes procrastination, because freedom is within you. For some reason we think we're free, so we'll never be, because we haven't recognized slavery. You still a slave, look at how you behave, debating on where and when and how and what master gave.
Hello everyone, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, a weekly show about authoritarianism, government overreach, and global injustice. I am your host Conrad Rogas, reminding you that if tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there's someone in the street keeping it at bay, and it's not United States fighter jets. Anyway, this is episode 11. Today is February 17th, 2023. And we're going to talk about those U.S. fighter jets. We're going to talk about the Chinese balloons. We have to get into the unidentified flying objects. It's about time. I really should have done this story last week, but I was going into the State of the Union address, talking more about that, and even though I did put it in the thumbnail of last week's episode, but I see that this story has gained more traction. It didn't really just blow over, so we'll address it fully here. To summarize what happened, on February 4th, the United States Air Force shot down a Chinese balloon out of the sky, which was pictured through different parts of the country. It was this high altitude, whether it was a weather balloon, a surveillance balloon, or some other type of vehicle with military capabilities. It's not the point. It came out that it was a Chinese balloon, and they admitted as much. And then about a week later, 3 other objects were shot down. This came out as they were unidentified flying objects, leading people to think they were like aliens and UFOs. And I'm not sure that the people who put out these stories, who control the media, I don't think they even knew that the people's mind would go to aliens, because of course, happening a week later, it was obviously supposed to be the same thing as the balloon, as the surveillance balloon, and this was supposed to be like the China part of the China narrative, that these are Chinese craft. But I guess the people are unpredictable sometimes. But just to take it a step back, how is this tyranny? Why is this on This Week in Tyranny? How do the balloons, what do they have to do with government overreach and global injustice? Basically, because these stories are not what they seem, and that is what I will endeavor to show in this video, both from the esoteric and the exoteric sense. I'll break it down kind of the way I did the State of the Union address, by talking about the surface level understanding, what is basically the meaning that people are supposed to get out of it, that effect, the desired effect on the population. And I'll talk about the esoteric. I'll talk about the messaging, hidden messaging between members of the occult through these events. So, and just to go further, really just put it out there, let's put all our cards on the table. Yeah, I'm talking about conspiracy. I'm not going to shy away from that word. I know a lot of people speaking the truth and talking about freedom. You want to avoid the word conspiracy and conspiracy theorists so much because of how much you will be ridiculed, right? But when we are talking about this, basically the narratives are clear, and I don't have 100% of the information as to which part of which government, of the Chinese government and the United States government, played what part in facilitating this event and putting it together and making it develop the way that it did. So I'm not accusing anybody, I'm not accusing any government particularly, or members of government particularly. I'm going to look at the situation as a whole and prove that there are occult narratives here, and that there are things going on behind the surface. And I'm not going to run away or be scared of saying the word conspiracy in this show, because that's what we're talking about. The military history of conspiracies and false flags is well documented. I always talk about the burning of the Reichstag and the Gulf of Tonkin event, and we won't even go into it because it will derail the episode. Let's begin the episode. I want to begin with the esoteric, which it should be. Usually you would think it's the other way around. You would think that you would start with the surface level, begin with the general media narrative, what's going on in a geopolitical sense. But I want to talk about the esoteric first, and that is in line with that whole idea of let's not run away from the conspiracy angle. Let's not run away from what I'm really trying to get across, is that this is a coordinated plan, a coordinated narrative between China and the United States in like a Cold War continuation. Okay, so yes, I am talking about conspiracy. Now, this balloon, the main one, was shot down February 4th, and this was an Imbolc ritual. Imbolc is a holiday on February 2nd, around that time, which is one of the 8 pagan holidays. If you look at the pagan wheel of the year, February 2nd is the midpoint of the winter solstice and the vernal equinox, or the spring equinox, the beginning of the spring. So that's a very important day in the occult traditions, in the pagan traditions. People think it's not important anymore because we think that's just gone away. Occultism and paganism has just gone away. But this was definitely an Imbolc ritual, and the word Imbolc means in the belly, and that refers to the ewes, female sheep, becoming pregnant around this time and producing milk. Taking it a step back, this is ancient Gaelic, ancient Irish holiday. So they celebrate the Imbolc holiday. It has to do with Saint Bridget, their patroness saint. And the reason they celebrated this is because a few reasons, but one of the things that became a symbol of this is the sheep. They would begin to produce milk, and around this time, that is how the people would know in the beginning of the winter that the spring is coming, right? Because it is like a one of these foreshadowings of the springtime, and it represents new beginnings. And of course, that's very similar to Groundhog's Day, and I'll talk more about that. But to Imbolc specifically, Imbolc means in the belly. It talks about that that egg, and it actually represents the egg of the mother goddess. Okay, and this will make sense. I'm going to talk about it more, but when you see the image of that Chinese balloon, the famous image that they took a picture of in Montana, and you just see a big white circle, it looks like the full moon. That's because that shape, that image, is supposed to represent the egg. It is definitely a part of the Imbolc ritual, and I know it was February 4th, it wasn't February 2nd, but essentially it's around this time. It's not the date itself that's important, it's what the date represents. So that's why they had the balloon pictured that way, even though in reality it might serve a completely different purpose, it might look different. But when they take that picture and you see that pure white circle, that represents the egg of the mother goddess, right? It represents new beginnings. And that mother goddess, in the Irish tradition, it's Saint Bridget. Saint Bridget's Day is February 1st, and the feast is February 2nd, Imbolc. This is actually my birthday. I was born on February 2nd, and that's one of the reasons I learned a lot of this stuff. It's researching more about my birthday and looking at the significance of certain days. Why do a lot of things appear on a certain day? And as I will prove it with February 2nd, you've got so many holidays, so many rituals from all different parts of the world. How could they possibly develop this? And what does it have to do with now shooting down a Chinese balloon hundreds and thousands of years later, of governments doing this, right? Occultists doing this now. Why do they even do that? Before I forget, that image of the full silver pale circle, it is like the full moon, and the full moon happened on February 5th. So they shot down the balloon on the night before the full moon, and that is also not an accident, right? This is very ritualistic, and I'm going to talk more about the different cultures, the different rituals, and fill in the holes and develop like an image of what I'm trying to get across here. Saint Bridget, the Irish ancient goddess on Imbolc, she's like the fair maiden. She's the white lady, the patroness saint. She's like their Virgin Mary. That's not to say that's that actual person, but that's how much they revere and respect her, right? Saint Bridget. And Saint Bridget has a symbol called the Saint Bridget's cross, and it's like a line of sticks from 4 different directions that meet in the center. So it's kind of like they form a square in how they come together. It's like a swastika with the second edges cut off. And they hung this on their doors and windows on this day, on February 2nd. And they form a circle. I mean, they form a square in the center. And that's relevant because one of the other objects they shot down a week later, right? They said it was octagonal shape. It was of an octagonal shape. And that's very important because the octagon is a really crucial, deep occult symbol that a lot of people don't even realize, that I found out very recently that this symbol even exists. But since I did, this is definitely part of that. Now, why does the octagon matter? Because the octagon is basically 2 squares turned 90 degrees on top of each other. And if you cut off like the edges of an 8-pointed star, that's what the octagon is. It's 2 squares. And what this represents is the occultists saying that they control everything, both the squares. The square on top of the square is we control all the positive and all the negative. And that's why also, and you can get it officially from the reports, they said it was an octagonal shaped craft that they shot down with strings hanging off of it. And they literally mean strings. Now, did that have any kind of functional value? Probably not. Were there even strings? This may not have even happened that way. But when they say it was an octagonal object with strings, they're talking about those are the strings that the puppet masters are using. They're pulling our strings, and then they're casting that octagonal shape, and that's us, the square on top of the square. You see this on a lot of police uniforms, and this is a cult mockery of the police. There's a presentation called Occult Mockery of Police and Military Personnel by Mark Passio, where he talks about this. That's why I got this information from. There's not a lot of information about the octagon and that. This is a very recent knowledge that I've came into the knowledge of. So they're making the St. Bridget's cross because they had these 4. There's a reason they shot down 4 objects. And that's exactly what it was. One of them was an octagon. They shot down 4 objects for a reason. And then they're going to cast them down now off of the strings. And that is basically another allusion to the control system they are forming. It's very similar to the State of the Union address, how I broke it down last week about the dark great work, and really giving tidbits of information, allusions to how they want to build that pyramid, that slavery totalitarian system. Now, I mentioned Groundhog Day related to Imbolc, and Groundhog Day, this the tradition where the groundhog comes out, and if he sees the shadow, he's going to return back into his hole, and then that means that winter is going to continue. This comes from the Imbolc holiday, and it became associated with like weather prognostication, what they called weather lore. And what the groundhog thing means is basically, a groundhog or a beaver comes out, and the shadow just means if the skies are clear, then that means there's going to be a prolonged winter. So that is also related to the fire in the belly ritual, because these are, the pagan holiday comes from the idea that people are sitting inside, it's cold, it's the middle of winter, and they're looking for signs that springtime is coming, right? That's what the weather prognostication is all about. And clear skies means that there will be a prolonged winter. And what happened here? They shot down that symbol, that egg of the mother goddess, right? They shot down that full moon, and they cleared the skies, these fighter jets, right? The military that shot down this craft. And that purification of the skies means that there's going to be a prolonged winter. And this really is a Imbolc ritual, or a Candlemas ritual, because this is also called Candlemas, right, in the Roman, the Christian tradition. And that's the festival, the purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, right? Because that happens 40 days after birth, right? Jesus Christ was born on the 25th, Christmas. Then you have 40 days later, you've got February 2nd, as the story goes. And it's not about the historical accuracy of any of this, but it's about the symbolism, right? That's why I wanted to start with the heavy esoteric stuff, because there's really no point in easing into it. This is the stuff you have to understand, and then we can talk about what this is meant to do as far as China and U.S. relations. This is really the more important part. Real quick about Candlemas, which is also February 2nd, right? Different culture, technically different traditions, supposed to be a different ritual, but it's really the same thing. And I'm going to read from Leviticus chapter 12, verses 6 and 7. When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. He shall then offer them before the Lord to make atonement for her, and then she will ceremonially clean from her flow of blood. Okay? This is a Christian ritual, allegedly, but you see the pagan roots. A dove, a young pigeon or dove. Now, a dove in Latin is colum. Colum is the word that means dove. So, when they shoot down that white object that represents the egg of the goddess, that is also tied into the cremation of care and the destruction of the feminine ritual. The destruction of the female, destruction of the feminine, cremation of care. This is like a long-running list of occult rituals, really satanic rituals, that have to do with destroying the emotional and heart-based center of energy within us, that base of love and will, which both of those are in our chest, in the heart, and that's a feminine energy in a sense of togetherness, in a sense of care, attention, right? So 2 examples of that have to do with Colum, the dove, is you have one, your Columbine shooting. You know, Columbine, the Columbine has to do with the dove, the white dove. And that was, of course, a school shooting around the springtime. Really the original school shooting. That was the one that started all of them. You see a mass shooting, seems like every other week. Well, it all started at Columbine. This was a non-phenomenon before Columbine. This was a ritual that occurred then, and that was an occult ritual then. Then you had the Columbia, same word, right? Columbine, Columbia, Colum, same word. And that disaster was February 1st, 2003. That's another Imbolc ritual. It happened around the same time, beginning of February. And it has to do with the destroying of the dove, which is the destruction of the mother goddess. And they do this ritual over and over again, because if the care aspect, I call it the mother goddess. I don't really want to make it overly spooky or pagan. It's talking about the thing within us that makes us care enough for change and sacrifice, right? To destroy our center of care and empathy and compassion and love for other human beings. The reason they play it out over and over again where they destroy this is because so that the people don't have the spirit to stand up, right? To stand up to defend the innocent, to say no to the coming dark great work. That is what those occult sacrifices are for. And February is the month of purification. It means that. Februs was the ancient god of purifications of the Romans and Etruscans, right? Februare means to purify in Roman. And his holiday was the Februalia, which is February between the 13th and the 15th, which happens to be when we have Valentine's Day. Now that's supposed to be a different thing, allegedly, but the reason these holidays happen around the same time is because they're all just continuations and offshoots of the ancient one religion, which is really not a religion at all. It is an occult tradition of knowledge, and then the different cult aspects that became involved in that, right? How you have this god is that god, this and that. But the people who really know about this, the occultists doing this, they understand this at a level of, they're not just doing rituals to worship some force in the sky. They're talking about the actual forces and laws of nature itself. And that's where the one religion comes from. It is the dark aspect of that. The light aspect of that is teaching natural law and morality and trying to make the world a better place, which is what I do. So Valentine's Day, around that time, February, the month of purification. Coincidentally, see, I'm doing these topics, these videos get longer and longer. Another thing that has to do with purification is you have the whole train thing in East Palestine, I believe, Ohio, where they have this train that is now spewing toxic stuff into the atmosphere. The complete opposite of purification, right? That happens around this time. That is also not an accident. I know disasters happen all the time, but a lot of it, most environmental disasters that become prominent in the national media, they are definitely ritualistic, and this is definitely related to what I'm talking about with the Columbia Mother Goddess ritual that's happening here. And you see, they're really perversions of that. It's not that they're doing these rituals in the true sense, like in some kind of benevolent, well-meaning way. These are perversions of that. They're really inversions of these rituals, because that train that is spewing toxic stuff that of course the EPA and is going to say is safe, is safe. No, you don't have to worry about that. There's no toxic chemicals. There's no sodium fluoride in the water. You don't have to worry about anything like that. But anyway, these are bastardizations and perversions of those rituals, just like them clearing the skies to signify a prolonged winter. That's a perversion. They're saying the winter will continue, and that the springtime will be theirs, but we will continue to remain in the dark, in the cold, and remain in fear. Which, when I get to it eventually, talk about the exoteric, it is all about fear, this whole event. So around the full moon this happens, destruction of the feminine. And that, I have to emphasize, that octagonal object with strings attached is about the double square. Like, say, the square is the symbol of structure, right? The symbol is so rigid, it's uniform, its angles are the same, the lengths of its sides are the same. It represents the closed system, a perfect system. So it's the square of the USA and the square of China superimposed on top of each other, creating the octagon. Now, I know literally it would create an 8-pointed star, but if you just cut off the triangles at the end, you get the octagon. Essentially, it's the same thing. And the strings show that this is done by the puppet masters. And they shut down a balloon because who employs the use of balloons? Clowns. They're laughing at us, saying that there are puppet masters and we're clowns, looking at the TV and worrying about the balloons and about aliens because somebody popped some balloons and we're worried about war with China. Complete clowns, not knowing what they know. These occultists, they have this knowledge and they think they're better than you because they're in a position of money and authority and power, and they have this knowledge and they have this view of human beings as like a lower species who's basically just made to be slaves and wants to be slaves. They have no respect for us at all because they see the lack of respect we have for ourselves. So, balloons for the clowns. And that'll complete the esoteric section. Okay? I know that was a lot, but my knowledge of these occult traditions is not even that extensive, right? This is like just from a quick search, this is what you get. And you could see the connections there. There are so many deeper connections that I am not privy to, right? I haven't discovered yet. I'm not somebody that researches these things like rituals that much. But just being able to develop that connection, just from that, just shows you that this is deliberate. This is a contrived event, a coordinated event on some level between either parts of the United States government, the Chinese government, definitely the military, because they're the ones who shot down the craft. So somewhere along the line, somebody knows something. Who knows for sure is the media. Because what we're really going based on is not even that they shot this down or where it came from. When we get the story from the media, you get this. And then you get somebody like me being able to make a video about Imbolc, Groundhog's Day, Candlemas, the full moon, the Mother Goddess rituals, and all this, and tie it into what's going on. So it's really blatant, the messaging. The messaging is out there, and the esoteric part of it is very deep. But let's go into the exoteric, the surface level, what's going on. Let's talk about what it means for us today. So U.S. and China relations are at a low point in recent years, right? We all know this. Ukraine, Russia was kind of the beginning of this, kind of the East versus West struggle, blue versus red. And now you have the whole thing with China and Taiwan. The tension really started or intensified during the pandemic, because of course it came from China, right? So that is subconsciously already creating friction between us and the Chinese people. And now what you have, as I demonstrated in last week's episode of the State of the Union address, you've got this increase in nationalism and an increased faith in institutions. So people are more proud to be American now, right? That American spirit is reinvigorated a bit. So now they're fanning the flames of conflict, division, and war with China. And that makes the people, instead of talking about all the immorality and all the things that the United States government is doing, stealing from them, taking from people, completely destroying our rights, taking our right to self-defense, continuing to put forth unclean water, unclean air, doing all of this, lying about all kinds of scientific and medical data, right? Instead of talking about that, we're talking about China is the enemy right now, right? Very similar to post 9/11, where you had the hidden enemy of terrorism. And this is very similar. It's somewhere in the sky. It's the balloons. The Chinese UFOs are coming, right? That is how people are seeing this, and it's just all fear. And fear makes people set aside their differences, set aside their detailed and rational thinking, and it puts them into a very animalistic, fearful mind. Self-defense, not even self-defense, but a self-preservation, a very base level mind. But about China and the United States, China as a nation, as a world superpower, was created solely for the purpose of the United States having a formidable enemy. This is why China is so important in the geopolitical globalist scheme and plan, because without something like China, the United States has no reason to go to war, right? We have no reason to mobilize. We have no reason to increase taxes. There's nothing to prepare the people for and scare them of, right? Because I've talked about how war always increases taxes, right? It's going to send people over there, and it's going to cause them to not question police brutality as much, not question unjust wars and whether we should be having an interventionist policy and going into any nations at all, having military bases anywhere. It kills those questions because now you have the threat. And the war is going to be used as a justification for why things get worse. For supply chain being destroyed, for inflation, because we'll need more money and we'll need more military mobilization, for the war with China, whether it will be a physical war or a cold war. It'll probably be a cold war. There probably won't be war with China, but there will be military activity which will essentially make a war with China, and that will give the governments, not just the United States government, but rulership in general, the positions of authority, they're going to have an excuse. They're going to use that to justify why we make less, why we have to work longer hours, why we can't order things, why the supply chain will be destroyed, and it'll be like in Soviet communism, in the Soviet occupation, where you can't get anything at the store unless you get the little piece of paper from the government for a sausage and 2 bottles of vodka, right? They're going to use it to justify that, to justify why there have to be checkpoints in the streets, more fees, why there has to be military, why people will have to be searched, why flights why there will be higher surveillance, all this stuff that they're planning to do anyway. They will be able to bring it in and implement it because of the war with China narrative, right? They're going to do this anyway. But the reason you have this balloon story and now all this fear about these flying objects coming from China doing surveillance on us, that will actually not affect us at all. But that would create the big bad boogeyman, so that when slavery and tyranny comes up even more and is right outside of our door, they'll be able to say, we have to do this because of China. See what China made us do. Without an external threat, there is no tyranny, right? Without a fear of something outside, there's no oppression, right? You will not be oppressed then. And this is what cults do. This is what Marilyn Manson and the Heaven's Gate cult and Jonestown. It's always a fear of something that's going to happen. There's going to be an end of the world. A big, huge cataclysm is going to happen. And because of that, you have to do A, B, and C. And that's what's going on. And at this stage in the game, the people should really know. But the reason they don't really know is because they don't understand the esoteric. And that's why I started with it. It's because all that stuff that seems like it's not following. Like, yes, you have to actually go and study occultism. It's not enough to know that criminals and psychopaths control the world. You have to have the totality to know as much as they do, or at least have an inkling of knowledge in all the different aspects, in all the different rooms of the mansion, right? So there is no external threat. The threat is internal. The threat is internal. There's no threat with China. There's no threat with. Yes, there is a threat with the mass shootings and the violence in the streets, right? That is a very real threat. But the causal factors of that, it's not something external. It's not the external that we should be focused on. You will not limit. You can't just limit the tool and then try to reduce it that way, because you're not dealing with the cause, you're just dealing with the symptoms. If you want to deal with the cause of these problems and why our world is becoming worse and worse and a more dangerous place, is because that threat, ladies and gentlemen, is internal. And not only internal as in the government, our government doing this, I mean in the mind. In the mind is where the problem is, that we do not have enough care and will to get the knowledge and then the courage to say no. And I hope the whole destruction of the feminine, destruction of care, of compassion, I hope it's starting to make sense, because this is why they do it. Because if people were online to both self-defense, right, to being red-blooded and ready to defend yourself, but also being in tune with that internal care, not just to go fight, not just to oppose this and that, but be able to reach out and help the people within our family, help the young, the children, help to speak out against injustice and abuse and violence when you see it going on in your everyday life. But instead, we're focused on what the news tells us. So this is a toxic environment they're creating. And I can't emphasize it enough that the threat is internal. So you do not have to worry about China at all, because it's always the government of the United States that is our number one threat. And we always have another invisible threat, like with the war on terror. And they're talking about this now, right? Representatives of China and of the United States, like high schoolers, because someone in China said, "Oh, the atmosphere for discussion was not right." So basically, like, "Oh, I'm not talking to you because you did this, but the U.S. is saying we're going to be fair but firm. We had to shoot down your little toy aluminum aircraft because to defend the civilians, right? And then China's saying, well, you escalated the situation. It's basically like kids just sitting there with their arms crossed, and it's childish. It really is childish, and it makes sense why they blew up a balloon, because you have to be a clown to believe in this stuff. You just have to say it like that. We don't have to worry about China. China is here, right? An oppressive system that wants totalitarian control is already here. We need to worry about being free here, then here, and then we could worry about China and come together with the people of China and exercise care between all peoples of the world. So that was This Week in Tyranny. And make sure you stay engaged in the heart. Do not feel fear, because fear is what fear does is it makes you inevitably walk into the trap that you fear. You create the boogeyman in your head, and then he appears. So have no fear. These people that do this, they have no fear either. That they use it as a tool, right? But once you rise above it, you can see it going on. You can tell others you can't be played. I'd just like to mention that I'm working on a presentation called Babyface Criminality that I will deliver a month from now. I want to have it up. It is going to really discuss some of these similar things to the last two episodes, about the way these people in government act and in the media, how they act, and really, if you understand it on a very common sense street level, is very childish, and it's very blatant. It's blatant, the lies and the crime that the government is engaged in, right? When they make these stories, it's actually, we could see that it's just a scare story. It's to create fear. And Babyface Criminality is an homage to the presentation Streetwise Spirituality. It's a really like a prequel to that presentation, Streetwise Spirituality by Mark Passio. And I've been noticing that these last few episodes, I've really been trying to talk about it more in a street type of sense, like how I talk about the balloons are for clowns, and talking about how translating Biden's rhetoric to basically mean you're gonna do this, and that. I think it's really important for us to develop that level of vision to see these moves. Just because they're wearing a suit and tie doesn't mean they're not doing really childish moves, really juvenile type stuff. And we need to come online to that. And in Babyface Criminality, I will be talking about all the different practices of government and all those different aspects, how they resemble those of a common criminal. So I just wanted to kind of foreshadow that. That's coming soon. I'm going to hold myself to that. And in the meantime, let's plan for another week in tyranny. So I'll see you next week. Thank you for viewing the video.
You either vote for the mumps or the measles. Whether you vote for the lesser of two evils, you vote for evil. Politics and God are not equal, but the education to get on God is really lethal. People have more respect for a holy book than they do for a